And now, everyone, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to your host, Danita Berg.
Thank you. As she said, my name is Dr. Danita Berg. I'm the director of the English department here at Full Sail, and I'm hosting this session titled Creative Collaboration, which is looking at the challenges inherent in approaching creativity as a team sport. So put your hands together and help me welcome our panelists. Chris Martignago, Kim Alpert, Jonathan Mayer, and Nate Howe. And my first question for our panelists is, how do you work best, alone or in a group?
What order do we go in?
You choose. You're next to me, so I'm looking at you.
Okay, cool. I'll go first. Sorry. I really like the Britney Spears mic thing going on. It's a good look. The question is, how do I work best alone or in a group? I prefer working in groups, but I guess it depends on what the task is. At a record label, we have like groups within groups within groups, so just making sure that everybody's on the same page is like a constant challenge. And but both sides of it are rewarding, so I'm trying to think of like the best way to answer it other than both and just the singular word. But I don't know, it really depends on the challenge. And working singularly, sometimes when I'm working on a song or on an artist's record, too many people talking about like creative decisions about what should be happening there will drive an artist insane. So in that situation, I'd work best alone.
Makes sense.
Was that good?
Yeah.
That was good.
Validate me.
Yeah, no, that's the stuff that I think I was going to answer similarly. It depends on the task, and it depends on the group. I think sometimes you're approached with a really difficult challenge of being put in a group where not everybody has the same level of interest, not everybody has the same level of expertise, not everybody wants to like stay in their lane and actually collaborate. So it can be a really complicated journey to have to do a group kind of setting. But when it flows and when it's right, it's just like, it's magic. And you have all these working pieces, and it's more than you could ever do as one person. And that's kind of this incredible chemistry that gets made. I think in a lot of times in my career, I'm definitely a person who's worked alone a lot, even if I'm working with others. Typically, like, we'll get in the room and then I wind up going off into a cave to like turn my speakers up and like do whatever I need to do and then come back. But yeah, you're kind of never actually alone, because like then there's always like a client and like they have an opinion. So in my universe, very rarely is it alone.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think timing has a lot to do with it too. So I mean, it might not just be the task; it might be the point you're at in the process too, depending on what you're doing. And so I've had to learn through trial and error over the years when to bring certain stakeholders into a party, right? And so, I mean, I producing scores for video games takes a really long time. So I might be on a project for 2 years, and I've definitely had, times when I regretted pulling stakeholders in at a certain time, getting too much feedback at the wrong time, or vice versa. Waiting too long to pull someone in and finding out we'd just spent a bunch of time and money doing the wrong thing. So it's always sort of it's a great question to ask, because it changes all the time. And I think it boils down for me to like situational awareness and just kind of reading the tea leaves and going, okay, I need to call all these people and pull together a meeting and make sure we're all on the same page before I do this next thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. For the most part, if you're working, on a big project, it's always with a group. But there's certainly times where you have to be able to go make your magic, like Kim said, and just know what you need to provide back to the group, and know what makes you the most inspired and how you work best. Go create that atmosphere and bring, what you need to bring back to the group and put it all together. But everything we do is collaborative, and being able to be creative, have vision. But to let other people's vision influence that and be a part of it, it's not always easy. for any creative. And learning to collaborate, learning to work in a group is critical if you want to be a professional in any setting that they teach degrees in.
Thanks. Okay.
That's collaboration right there.
Look at that. Look how that works.
I did my part.
I already have one.
Kim, take a sip and pass it down.
I'm just gonna put that one for later.
We're very hydrated up here.
It's like 2 of everything, especially for you.
And just to build off of that, I'll give a personal example because I'm going to ask you for specific examples next. But as a creative writer, I'm often writing alone. But I can talk about twice this week where I've sent something to a mentor or to someone I've worked with in the past. And like, what do you think of this work? And they'll think about it and give it back to me. And I'm like, that's so much better. So I was wondering if you could all name a specific example or a project where collaboration has helped you with a project or a challenge.
Or grandfather clock.
Yeah,
right?
we'll do this right now.
I don't want to step on
I
collaborative
like
toes
that.
here.
Yeah, no, I like that. The grandfather. That's a good one. Cool.
I don't know. Everything I do is collaborative. I guess the coolest thing to me, now that I own my own studio, is when I see a project or a creative endeavor become more than what it could be if it was just myself on it. That's the beauty of collaboration. And when you take the skill sets of other people, the life experience, the opinions, when they swirl together under a unified art direction and it makes something larger than any one of us could do, that's what gets me excited now. That's what gets me fired up. And I look for people that thrive in those environments.
I'd love to say that my entire career I've gone out of my way to, be super inclusive and stuff. But I think starting out, I definitely spent a lot of time making sure that I was heard in groups and stuff like that. And I think you learn over time to, for me anyway, I kind of, just building on what Nate said, I kind of like revel in watching my team do things and seeing them succeed. And then it also changes when you're in a leadership role because whether you, sorry, this is kind of a long-winded answer, but whether you realize it or not, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not, the things you say when you're a team leader carry more weight. And even if you just want to be one of the gang, you have this impact on people and the things you say matter. And so now at this point in time, I tend to endeavor to collaborate first, to let the team lead and then steer from behind when I need to. But it wasn't that way starting out, and I think that it probably just takes time for anyone to come to that. But that on every project I do now, I always want to see what other people are thinking, and I try to speak last whenever possible. It's kind of a rule that I impose on myself. I don't always do it, but because I just blurt things out. But that's kind of my goal on everything.
I think kind of take it back to where we started. Review for me is part of everything that I do. As a professional, I'm doing a lot of the reviewing, being that I'm in more of a leadership role. In my art and in my kind of consultant work, and in my just kind of personal body of life work, I have that network of people that pretty much review anything that I do before it goes out, because I'm incredibly, not self-confident because I'm an artist. So I question everything. And the people that are closest to me, I respect and admire. And I know that if I write something or I take a photo or a video and I'm like, does this say what I think it says? Does this mean what I'm trying to say? Like, this is, is that reflective? My best friend Rachel, like, we talked this morning about work. Like, pretty much any morning, the two of us communicate about what she's working on, what I'm working on, and then we're not working together on those things, but we kind of springboard, and all those ideas, and it makes it better. I think having that network is really, really crucial, and that was a huge part of my time here. Mm-hmm. Being in digital art and design, even folks that weren't in my class and in my degree. My best friend was a computer animation student. And I used to like walk across the parking lot in our apartment complex like late at night and be like, look at my video. And he'd be like, I'm playing games. But I would get him to. And then, he'd be like, look at these drawings. And be like, I don't understand. What is that? And, we created a language because you're talking about things that are visual. So finding people that you can communicate with about those things is really, really important. Developing your own language to be able to talk about those things is really important. And as you move forward in your career, being able to describe something that doesn't exist, like visually, in a way that is beyond just it's a square and it's blue and it floats above this, and really talking about kind of the feeling and the emotion of it is really going to be helpful. It's going to serve you in spades later on.
So an example that I have, I work with a rock band called Paramore, and so when we started working on this album, the same guy who did the last album, his name is Justin Meldell Johnson, plays bass for Beck. He produced M83's past 2 albums, and just kind of like going on down the line of all the people that it took to make sure that album is coming out this year, last year when we started the process, it was about working with the manager of the band to be like, when is the band available? What does the band need to get this started? And part of the process for this record was different than the other in that they wanted to do it in Nashville. It meant a lot to them to do it there because they've never done an album in Nashville, but that's where they're from. So then it was about counting on finding the right place where they could rehearse the songs that they wanted to do. So we had to count on another team member of hiring out the studio to show up and have the hands that were going to help them, rehearse in that room so that we could get the songs to a point where they were ready to go into RCA Studio A to actually put it down and record the whole thing. So then going into that process and then taking it to marketing and deciding on what the first single is and when that's going to come out and all of the people that are involved in that, like that to me, just the Paramore project in general for me is like a really good example of how people collaborate really well. And my part in that as an A&R person is facilitating and being knowing when to speak up when something doesn't feel right or is wrong, or when I know that the band could be better, and also any other parts of the puzzle, being the artist relations person with the label. We're the representative there. We have to go to the label and, speak on behalf of the artists and their team and be like, this is wrong, this is what we need to do and to fix it. So, I'm proud to say we met all of our deadlines because everybody did their job right in that situation, as much as you could meet a deadline in a creative space like with music. But that's one particular example that that process worked really well, and we have to do it all the time with albums.
Great, thanks, perfect. Has there ever been a time when you felt collaboration was particularly challenging or even backfired on you, and what did you do?
So we're keeping the grandfather clock thing going. Cool. Just making sure we're all good.
We're locked it in.
I already knew we were in sync because the hat thing. So again, with the A&R process, a lot of times with artists, it's not the case with Paramore, they write internally, but a lot of our artists have to write with other people, and that process can take a long time before we even get to the point of starting the process of making the album, like figuring out what the songs are going to be. And sometimes for some artists, it's 150 songs that we have to figure out before we get to, the point of these are the 12 songs that are going to be on an album, and these are going to be the 12 songs that the fans should hear. So in working with a lot of people, sometimes we have to take chances on new people, and it doesn't always work out. And sometimes the production sounds super cool, but we start to lose sight of what the project is in essence, and we have to protect ourselves from that too, while being open to the possibility that what we were setting on the path to do isn't always going to be where we ultimately end up. So being open to that too. So that's where it gets difficult, is working with others to create songs and to create the records that you hear. It's not always easiest dealing with them and their teams because sometimes you're just not on the same page. So I think it's ultimately just aligning yourselves with people who share similar values and just doing good business with people who do good business.
That's a good answer.
Thanks.
I think it is. I don't want to just talk about stories where it happens to me. I also want to talk about stories like maybe that I was difficult to others. So, the first half of my career, maybe not a full half, but the first good bit of it, I'm an operator. So, I'm reporting to a creative director or reporting to a lead. And particularly in like an edit suite or in a studio, you do in-rooms. So they sit behind you and they literally bark what they want and you control the surface. Knowing how to do that and kind of the politics of that are one of the things that seasoned me as a creative. So that's kind of the process and the hierarchical respect and kind of how I've gone about most of my projects in my career, whether it was interactive or experience design or the like. And I think I have like a very like, this is how you want it. Yes, we'll do that. Like, we'll get it. Like, I just trust that like the elders and the people would give me good feedback. And then at the end of things, if I had questions or I thought it should be a different way, bring those up once the project's done, or like right before a review, so that there's time if it does make sense, but that you're not interfering with someone else's process, and the trust that someone knows what they're doing if they've asked you to come and collaborate, and what that kind of situational awareness. Mm-hmm. That's like my favorite expression. Like that's really, really true. And now in the latter part of my career as a creative director, I definitely get into situations on the opposite side where I have to do a lot of over-explaining myself to other creatives, particularly with, we hire out other vendors and other companies, and they'll have a creative lead. So, we oversee larger creative and we work with the client and we define all of the pieces, and then I translate that, to the team that's going to execute. And sometimes their creative lead will come back and be like, well, we're going to do it this way. And I'll be like, no, we're not. Like, we're not doing it that way. And it can be extremely, extremely challenging, both professionally and personally. It's very disrespectful, and it can make it a very difficult process. And I've had that more than I would like, for sure. I think with some younger folks that I've worked with, I've been like, I need to see this particular, object designed, these 3 ways for these 3 reasons. And they'll be like, oh, well, really, just that one, that's the one, so I'm just going to do the one. And that's not, no, we need all 3. That's the task. So there's definitely, in creative, I think a lot of times people feel like they can have a lot of opinions, which they can, but you still have to do the work. And like at the end of the day, like that's doing the thing is like, it's work, and that has to happen. So yeah, it's definitely very challenging sometimes.
Just to build on that, I've been really lucky because I've been able to work in an environment where I've been able to both cause and witness that breakdown over the years in lots of different ways, and I've had a lot of opportunity to correct those mistakes, whether they're mine or someone else's, because the things we're doing, we iterate so much that even in the middle of a process that's going wrong, there are opportunities to steer it back the right way. And I think the longer I do it, the better I get at sort of recognizing those things ahead of time. But some great, just simple examples are like in a recording studio setting, if I'm recording a 70 or 80 piece orchestra, and there's a whole sort of hierarchy involved in that. If you've never seen a session like that for film or games or TV, they're run very metrically. And what I mean by that is we'll take a set of cues. So I might have 60 pieces of music that need to get recorded in a certain number of days, and I know that the orchestra I'm working with can record this many minutes an hour, and I've booked this many hours, and therefore I have to move this quickly through the cues, which never happens because there's an ebb and flow to it. So the band might struggle with one piece of music, and one thing that's caused that collaboration between the control room and this huge orchestra, there are 2 panes of glass between us, but that doesn't stop bad vibes from flowing. And I'm big on over the years I've gotten really big on just like all these new agey kind of, the tone that everybody sets in the space around them influences everybody else. And so making sure everybody's having a good time, making sure that, if I'm freaking out because we're going too slow, that nobody knows that, that it's all positive, and I'm just looking for ways to course correct in the middle of that. And definitely having too many cooks in the kitchen, can cause a problem, and literally too many cooks in the control room in a studio like that, I mean, you've probably seen this a lot too, is a really bad thing. And I've definitely, in an effort to try to be inclusive, gone way too far at times in letting more people in than need to be. And so I've gotten a lot better over the years at laying down roles ahead of time. So leading up to a session, I'll tell the 5 people that are going on that trip, okay, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do, and here's what you're going to do. And it does bum people out sometimes, but the outcome of those sessions, everyone's a lot happier. And then, to be inclusive, over time, if you use the same staff or whatever, like I have, you get to rotate those people through the roles and stuff. But definitely, there's a degree to which you want to open the door. And you have to know how much in those situations to do it.
That's a really wise answer. I mean, it's so true that sometimes when you're trying to foster an enjoyable workplace environment and you let somebody kind of, participate a little deeper than would be, sometimes it starts to hurt it. It's all great answers. To me, I guess the thing that I notice is during creative review times is a very sensitive time, whether it's a brief kind of interaction and course correction like he was just mentioning in the middle of design and of the process, or if it's a more formal review. That is where the potential for a lot of pitfalls happen, even with some seasoned artists and professionals. And I think some of the things that are tricky about it is, when the client needs something specifically, or when, as a leader, I'm giving some feedback based on a larger perspective, more than just that one design and that one artist kind of mindset. And what's tricky is when people get defensive about feedback, and there's a few more specific pitfalls than that, and I want to take it deeper, because every Hall of Fame and every panel you hear like, oh, take good feedback and everything. But to expand on that just a little bit, sometimes people fall into the fine, we'll do whatever you think phase. And that's not what we want, because you're hired and you're there because you have a creative mind and you have a vision and you're participating. You may not be the creative director, you may not be in charge of the entire thing, but you have a mind. Or the other thing is just kind of a difficulty of understanding, or just general vibes of being difficult. Like, well, what do you mean, make it blue? It's like, what do you mean? What do I mean? Make it blue, come on. So I think there's different ways people end up becoming a little bit difficult during creative reviews, and a lot of it stems from kind of a defensiveness. So one of the things that I like to advise myself and to you guys, and it's always important to remind yourself this stuff as you grow and as you keep doing things, is to make critiques and feedback and direction a two-way conversation, where one, it's showing that you're not so sensitive that you can't take the feedback, and two, it's creating a conversation where you're still a valuable creative influence in that feedback. So as somebody's telling you something, you can ask questions about it. You can, and now, not to be annoying, sometimes it just needs to get done and happen, but you can kind of turn it into a conversation, the feedback, a little bit, and ask for more nuance, more texture, ask follow-up questions, show that you're actively listening. Those sort of things get you back on track a lot quicker, and sometimes even more than just, okay, fine, I'll do this list of notes, It's a good way as you first get into the industry to show a boss that you're not a button pusher robot, but you're a person with a creative mind and a vision, and that you have what it takes to be a professional,
I want to piggyback off that for a second, because you hit something that's really, really great. And it's something that I heard when I was here last year. There was somebody who got a really, really horrible critique. And they were like, I didn't understand it. The instructor just kept saying it was horrible, this and that. And, not everybody gives great feedback. That's part of life. I know other creative directors that they do. They kind of give shit feedback. And, it's not helpful, but it's real. So developing that language, you need to push back. And, something especially with young designers that I really love is like, if they're willing to really fall on a sword for something and they're just like, no, I believe in this, I do this. And, it's my job as a creative director to listen. And if it's really like, something I'm not sure or they really need to experience it, I'll be like, all right, let's put it in the pitch. You're going to fall on a sword for it? You want it in there? It's in there. And then if the client tears it up and super hates it, they get to learn what that's like because they're listening. I love it when my team can like listen on like the client pitch on the phone and stuff.
Then they see the reality of how clients react. Because it's like, it doesn't matter that it's your baby and you poured all this time and money in it. They'll turn the page and be like, oh, I hate this direction. And then all your work for the last week is like, well, like they don't care.
Gone.
Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt, but
so the clock is shattered.
In addition to that, and just like, and forgive me if I'm just repeating what you guys already said, but it's like, as people who are dealing, like if you're not necessarily the creative person in this room, but you are working with people who are creative, I don't think it's necessarily a good enough answer to just say, make it better, or that's not good enough, or it's bad, or whatever. Like, if you're counting on them to create this thing for you and you're working with them on this project, it's your job as the person involved in that process to explain yourself and your ideas and your feelings. Even if you don't exactly know what it is, like be as specific as you can, because it really can drive an artist up a wall when you just say, it's not good enough, make it better. And it's like, what do you mean make it better? Like, is it too lo-fi? Or am I just like wearing the wrong thing in this photo shoot? Like, what is it that would make this better in your mind? And that comes from conversation.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that too, when you're on the receiving end of feedback like that, I think it's really important. We're talking about defensiveness. Is not just to lose that sense of defensiveness, which we're always telling each other all the time, but it's also the self-awareness to like, I feel like I'm at like a new age thing. I'm like situational awareness.
I
I like it.
I don't normally talk like that.
You're from the Bay.
But I do live in San Francisco. What does it feel like to give you feedback? I mean, that's the question I'm always asking myself is like, what's my body language like when somebody's critiquing my work? Am I sitting like this or like this, or am I leaning in and am I truly interested in what they have to say? Am I enthusiastic about, is the conversation that Nate's describing good for the person I'm having it with? Like when I ask questions, when they say, I need this to be different, and then I ask the follow-up question, how does that come out? Am I a hostile witness? Am I like, well, how do you want it to be different? It's pretty good the way it is, Or is the vibe like, oh yeah, I was thinking it was kind of off too, but I don't know, like how could it be better? Because I'm kind of stuck, and like just pulling those people in, because the more enjoyable it is to collaborate with you. I mean, this sounds really obvious, but it's hard, I think, and it's like, how much fun is it for people to collaborate with you, whether they work for you or you work for them or whatever? It's like a question I always want to be asking myself. It's tough.
And that's when you get to be together, when you're in person. So a lot of my critique, a lot of my team is all spread out all over. So having to understand how to give feedback written is really, really hard, and not everybody writes the same way. So, tone in email or text is like, or chat is just, it's the worst. It's the absolute worst. And I resisted emoji for like the longest time, but it does kind of help because I'm funny and I'm like, I like to be fun. Unless
they have an Android, then
I want to be funny. Yeah, and like I can be a little sarcastic and a little silly, and I've learned a lot of weird ways that like it's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody gets it. So I've had to figure out how to kind of navigate that and like give those cues written of like what I mean and how to make it fun, because it's fun to be in the office and give like feedback and be goofy and have that vibe, but you're like vibeless, even on like Skype you're kind of vibeless.
It's hard,
you don't see hand gestures, you don't see a lot of body language. It's a lot harder. So that's something think about, and don't get offended by it, and try to be more conscious. Like if you send somebody an email and it might have been harsh, or you receive an email and it might have been harsh, ask Like, did you mean that? Like,
Pick up
am
the
I
phone.
interpret? Yeah, pick up the phone. Did I interpret that the wrong way? I think especially with younger designers, I will ruffle feathers I didn't mean to just because of time. Because I can be very direct and I have a lot to do, and I'll be like, this is crap. Throw it out. We need to do it this way. This, and then I'm out. And like I go on to the next thing, because when we're really busy, like we're insanely busy and I'm on a ton of stuff, and they're just like, oh my God, I failed you. I'm gonna throw myself in the volcano. And like, it was actually really good. It just wasn't the right thing for this specific instance. And that's really, not how I wanted them to feel. I'm just busy.
Is there a volcano near you?
I mean, you can find one if you need
I mean, you're closer to that.
Yeah.
Someone in the office.
When I
I'm
was
very small.
It's like Google, but
when I,
It's like trapdoor with a volcano in my office. Design's terrible. Jump to your death.
I remember at one phase of my career, and I'll keep the names private except for my own to protect the innocent. I was coming into my own as a designer, and I was starting to become sought after, and a lot of studios were starting to compete for my time. And it's important that as you grow and develop in your own skill set, you remind yourself these lessons, just like how he spoke about now that he's leading teams and he has this different way of interacting with it and different way of listening first. And I mean, you gain nuance, and as you gain levels in your professionalism, you have to remind yourself. So I was in this phase where I was starting to get a lot of bookings. I was starting to feel really proud of my designs and starting to feel like I was making it. And I remember there was this producer that she was new at the company I was at. I was like the golden boy there. I was getting, they were always hiring me. She didn't seem like she had that much experience. And I remember she gave me some feedback, and I was very arrogant in that moment. And I said, oh, okay. And I just straight ignored it. She brought it up again, and I was like, yeah, it's a silly note, if the creative director gives it to me. But I was rude to her and unprofessional, And it was very early on in my career. 8-9 years went by or something, didn't see her. Started my own business. She's now in charge of a major network that would hire my company to do graphics. I don't think she probably would hire us, even though I don't act like that anymore. But you know what I mean? It's like you're really paying attention to it and thinking about how you react during feedback and reminding yourself as you get to different levels, there's still always something to learn. And the other thing is it just goes towards being a good creative person, in the sense that, like, let's say you disagree with something. A great creative person is a curious person. So you already know what's in your head. You've already created what you've created. Your skill set and everything you think has amounted in what you're showing. Well, why not get somebody else's perspective, even if you disagree with it, listen with an open heart and mind, and as a creative person, see what you can extract from that and inject into your thinking, your vision, and your execution. And then when you start to think in that way, people love collaborating with you, and it's fluid, and there's texture to feedback and two-way conversation, and then all of a sudden other people want to work with you on their projects. So critiques and feedback don't have to be this scary thing. They can also be an opportunity for you to, learn and grow and show your worth.
Can I tell another story?
Sure.
Because I thought of one that's it's like a student story, which I think is really good about one of my critiques, because there's two sides, and I think we talk a lot about like how to receive feedback and how to listen, but defending why you did something is also a really big part of feedback. And while you're in school is the best time to learn that, because you can't get fired from school. You can like fail, but like you can't like have like a really bad critique and they're like, get out, get fired. Like that's not gonna happen. Like none of these teachers are dicks like that. Like you're here. You paid for it. The other way around. You pay them. So when I was in my motion graphics course, my final project was this like really bizarre kind of like politically charged short. And I spent probably like an entire week building this 3-dimensional cave that I could fly a camera through that had this time remapped version of The Wolfman, the old black and white film about the Wolfman. It was all about just kind of this like subversion of politics. It was really important to me at the time. And it was like super important. And I spent a really long time making it, and like the camera had to, and everything else was kind of like in 2D, but like I had to make this camera fly in 3D. I had to build this tunnel. I had to have this Wolfman. Super important. And at the end, in the final piece, it was about 3 seconds. of that out of like 30 seconds for the spot that I was making. And the critique that I got, I remember the instructor being like, why, like that's such an incredible thing that you built. Why would you do that? Like, why would you make that so short? And I remember like thinking about that moment and then be like, because that's how long it was supposed to be. That's it. And we kind of had this dialogue, and he was like, oh, okay, like that's the story that you're telling. And understanding that balance of communicating why you did something, because the technical ability of it was there, but the purpose, you know, this, and especially when it's art and you're deciding the purpose, you know, how do you communicate to somebody what the intention was? And that's a really, really big part of critique, because sometimes people aren't going to know. I have that with clients constantly. It's what makes a great creative director, is understanding how to educate and explain, you know, what the process and the insight and the research is that brought you to this end conclusion, which is why it makes sense, which is why it will be successful. And that's a really important skill.
Thank you. I have one more question, then we're going to open it up to you. What advice, because you are all up here at the panel, you've obviously made it, would you give to new Full Sail grads who are in their first entry-level creative job, who want to show that they're team players, but they also want to get ahead? What did you do? And what advice would you give?
We're getting back on the clock?
Yes.
All right. I don't know, it's tricky because you're still, you know, in general terms, you're still really learning a lot about your craft when you get out of Full Sail. And there's a lot of pitfalls when you get that first gig where it's like, you know, you could come across as almost kind of overly interested in trying to force collaboration when people need to be doing their jobs and kind of, you know, so there's a lot of my advice would be reading the room, reading the situation, not just focusing on yourself or the point you're trying to make or showing that you're willing to do this, this, and this. It's really almost more important of when you're doing that and how you're doing it, and seeing what matters to the people around you, what matters to the studio, what matters to the goal, and letting that drive and dictate when you're, hey, let's collaborate, hey, let's talk, hey, I'm here to help, hey, what should I do? You never just want to, you know, default go to one of those states. I mean, I get a lot of new grad students that I work with that, you know, their instinct right off the bat is, what should I do now? Well, what should I do now? Okay, I did that, what should I do now? And you know, I don't want a robot. I want somebody with a mind. I want somebody to be able to have situational awareness and read the room and see what's happening, know what needs to happen, know when they are getting in too deep, ask a question then, know when it's time to be collaborative, know when it's time to shut up and listen. You have to have that ability to shift and turn it on and off. And you have to be dynamic. Creative people, creative work, when it's for hire, it's one thing if you're just making a self-expression piece and, you know, it doesn't matter, it's yours, who cares? But when you're making it for people that are paying you and when you're working on a team there is a vibe, there's a flow, there's inspiration, there's frustration, there's deadlines, there's pressure. You have different skill sets and levels of being able to handle that. You have different people involved, from maybe somebody that's more of a producer, that's less on the creative end, all the way to, you know, really whimsical designer or whatever. And you have to be able to read the situation and know how to act so that you flow with it and add to the creative process.
That's a great answer. I think something I could offer in addition to that might be just figuring out when you get an opportunity, no matter how big or small you think it is, just remembering that the most important thing you can do for people who are already doing, so finding people doing the thing that you want to do is really important, and not being careful, you know, there's a fine line between trying to find the perfect thing for you right now, because you don't know. I mean, the job I have now didn't exist when I graduated from Full Sail. There was nothing like it, and there still are very few like it because we built the department we have. So if I had left here and said, you know, I'm going to go do this, manage music production at PlayStation, people would have been like, okay, good luck. I have a music department, so I don't know. But there's a fine line between like finding the perfect gig and finding a gig, and you have to find that balance where it feels good for you, and trust your instincts. But then when you get it, and so I always say, find people that are doing the thing you want to do and help them. You're not going to just jump out of school and be the person doing the frontline work first. And really, even though it feels like you want to, and you can, and I'm sure you're all capable, I believe in every one of you, that you're missing something if you don't spend that time with the people doing the thing. And so seeking them out, and then just helping. Don't worry about being heard or contributing to the final product. Make their day better. And this is back to the hippie good vibes thing and stuff. It's like show up early, leave late, offer to do the things that study those people and figure out what's going to make things better for them. And then pretty soon they can't live without you. And suddenly all these other things are just going to open up for you. Mm-hmm. And so it's just making sure your focus is on that. Because, I was very impatient. I am very impatient, actually. But when I left here, that was the biggest struggle for me, is I'd see people doing things, and I'd think, man, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And I'd have to sit back and just wait, and thinking, oh, I have a better idea than that. And I think, and whether I was right or not, it didn't matter, because when I was worried about that, I was missing the more important things that were happening, which was the actual work being done, and I wasn't learning. So your school's going to go on for you for quite a while, and just soak it in.
Great answer.
Yeah, I think, learning is a really big thing. I have a designer that's starting March 1st, and when we first talked about him in this position, the number one thing where I was like, oh, yeah, we got to get him, other than the fact that his work was good, because interestingly enough, he's coming on to be, like a UI, UX designer and do a lot of digital work. And 98% of the work that he's ever done is industrial design in 3D. And he's looking to make a big shift, and he understands it, but he came in, and when he spoke with me about it, he very eloquently knew, I want to learn. I want you to tell me what to start reading. I want you to tell me what classes I can take. I want to know that there's opportunity. I know this is the advancement for me. This is the thing I want to go do. And the level of excitement and his understanding of being a lifelong learner, I knew that even though day one, he's probably going to need more of my help and guidance than I kind of like to give at this particular stage with this position, that the bell curve on him is just going to be like, whoop, and as soon as he gets it, he's going to be phenomenal. And I got asked in one of my panels yesterday, like, what do I wish I had more time to learn? And it made me really happy, because it was a recognition of the fact that, yes, I'm still trying things and learning things, and it's an important part of my development, and it never really ends, I, very similarly, almost every job I've had, at least for the last 10 years, are all the first time the positions ever existed, technology that we didn't know would be here 3 years ago. So, I could have never known, and I'm so excited, and each one's just been better and more fun than the last, because I've been willing to continue to be open, to learn, to collaborate, and to ask a lot of questions, and be very, grateful and patient to get answers in time with people.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
That was really good. So I graduated not too long ago, and while I was at school, I was given an opportunity. I'm going to go through a pretty specific example, and I'm going to make it as short as possible. So I was given an opportunity through Full Sail to meet Steve Robertson, Steve-O, who has been at Atlantic now for 20 years this year, which, being an A&R person at the same company for that long is a feat of its own. He's my mentor, my boss, one of my just best friends, because I go to work every day and I get to work with somebody I respect that much. But to get to the point where I am now, my initial responsibilities doing internship, I was hanging plaques, rewiring rewiring speakers. I was just listening in on phone calls, taking notes, just everything that I could do to learn. And part of what you, I'm echoing a lot of what you guys said of listening and kind of situational awareness, checking out what's going on. In that process, I kept hearing things that were falling by the wayside. I kept hearing frustrations on the other side of the phone of how did we miss this artist? Like, I really wish we had this and this and this and this. And then I was like, well, I could do that. Yeah. And so I just literally got to work on, like, I just kept hearing pretty much like there wasn't a lot of people in that department that were really great at Excel. And each person had their own process, but they didn't really have a great way of communicating all of their findings and to the entire team. So that was the premise of research. And my job to, every week I'm pulling in at least 1,000 new artists based on different metrics, and then watching over time how they grow on each of these platforms. And that wasn't a gig that somebody really was doing. It was just, I saw a need and I wanted to help the company that I loved and respected. And I created an opportunity by myself by not discounting my abilities. Because and there was somebody I was talking to yesterday that was like, talking about where they're from, and that, people don't, and just like, I don't really like absolutes or blanket statements, but being like, people don't take me seriously because I'm from this place. I was like, well, you're just not talking to the people who do that. Like, they're not thinking straight, or, they might be in a bad mood, or they're just not very smart. Yeah. Because you totally have worth and value. All of your life experiences, like everything. The most random thing happened to me at my first A&R meeting, and this is like super like typical or like stereotypical A&R stuff. So we like sat around the thing. It's like, we need to do better at making sure we're covering the entire world. And it was like, who wants New Zealand? And just kept going around the room to each person and being like, who wants this country to like communicate and make sure you go and you visit and you are communicating with the local people that are there. And because all those people are experts in their communities. My random thing that I would have never been like, I'm valuable because of this, is my family are immigrants from France and I speak French. And no one else on the A&R team does that. So I was able to find another need of like, I'll take France. Cool, I go to Paris and like get to hang out with like all of the people that work out of the Warner office there. So it's like, I'm still learning from them, but the point is that you have value in areas that you might not necessarily like think, just not only the skills you learn at school, but where you come from and who you know. Don't discount any of it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. At this time, we have a few minutes for questions from our audience. If you have a question for our panelists, raise your hand and a microphone will be brought to you. And for those of you joining us online, please direct your questions to our online moderator, who will try to accommodate any questions you have. You've got the floor.
So my question is, throughout your career, would you guys consider yourself leaders or followers, or has it like fluctuated between the two?
It's a great question, and I think it depends. I mean, I think that if you're doing it right, you're both at different times, and maybe both, at the same time sometimes. And I think that it's really important to. I said this earlier, but like the analogy of steering the ship from the back. My favorite leaders and the way I've come to learn to aspire to be is to lead more quietly than it. I was really loud in collaborative spaces when I came out of school here, and I was really worried about people hearing me and being heard, and making sure I made a mark and made an impression on people. And taking up all the air in the room and being loud isn't necessarily always the way to make an impression on people. I mean, it makes an impression on people, but it might not be the one you want to make. So I think there's a really long answer to that question. I think that's a conversation about that. I'm not, I won't go crazy, but it's a conversation about what those things mean. Like, what does leadership mean to different people at different times, and what does following mean? Mm-hmm. And do the people I'm responsible for leading? I mean, I'm officially a manager at a corporation, so I'm tasked with leading people. But what does that feel like for them? And does that mean I tell them what to do? Is that the best way to lead them? Are they getting the most? Is the company getting the most out of them if I just go around and tell them what to do? Then if that's the case, why are they there? So it's for me, it's not. There's not an easy answer to that question, but it's asking. The answer to that question is asking all these questions and keeping that dialogue going with yourself over time.
That's a deep question, dude. Like, the more I think about it, I'm both, but it's more than that. You know, like.
You're right.
There's a really good book by Seth Godin called Tribes that I think is really great, and it talks about what you're saying, the blend of leaderships and why we need leaderships even in like what might be considered a follower's role. Mm-hmm. So I would read that. It's short. I don't read a lot of books, but I read it. So if I can, you can too.
Now go be a follower, read it, and then be a leader.
Solid
mix it back.
endorsement.
Yeah, Seth Godin. Books are short, enough for me to read. They are though, and they look cool on coffee tables. So.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Cool.
What's up, guys? My name's Ruben Ortega. I'm with DAD. Should be graduating here soon. My question is, like you up in Chicago, you out in Beverly Hills, would you rather clients come to you to look for work to collaborate, or do you have like specific people that go out to certain companies and say like, hey, we could do this for you? So which one do you rather prefer? Or is it like a mix of both, really, I guess?
It's both for me. We actively seek out clients and, keep expanding the business. People seek us out, so it's both. I don't really prefer necessarily. I mean, I like it when they just come to us. I guess I'm gonna say I'll prefer that. I guess, but yeah, what I really prefer is, a client that has an exciting challenge and a budget to do it with, and then get the team and go to town.
Yeah, I think it's more where they are in the timeline than like who comes to who first.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely, especially when it comes to advertising, like there's a cycle of planning that you have to kind of get in line with, and it's very far out in the past to now when things get locked in and get planned, particularly around budgets and kind of higher concept ideas. And a lot of the stuff that I do particularly now and kind of, evolved into are more, experimental experience design programs, which are a little bit different. It's hard to put them in that cycle. So I think the earlier the conversation, I don't care who starts it, as long as like we have enough time to build these things, because they are complicated and difficult, and they touch multiple departments typically, and they need multiple sign-offs and multiple languages. Like there's a lot more moving pieces than just put that spot on. We're putting it out on TV.
And then so like to go with the theme of following or leading, and then like with sales, it's like, are you pushing or are you pulling? And then it's like it's both. So there's it. I think both things are important. So.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking from just the A&R perspective and like what I do at the company with connecting artists and the people who help them make their music, I certainly give more opportunities and more chances to like newer people like around me, because it costs less money if the artists are already in that town and they can just go there, then awesome. But if I'm gonna send my artist to you and like fly them and then spend the money on the hotel and all of that kind of stuff, it's gonna be, and I'm not sure this is necessarily exactly relevant to you or what you do, but I think the values are still similar. It's just like, I will send my artist to them. It's all based on like how great their work is and how valuable is that value that's there worth that spend, like from a budget standpoint. And I think the same is true with like other creative roles of like, well, if I'm gonna hire this person, like, is their value and the fact that they want to live where they want to live, like, is it worth working with them, or is it not worth like not having the person in the room that I can go and like, will I go out of my extra way and spend the time that's just as valuable to do that?
You're qualifying that collaboration.
Yeah.
Because with a client or a partnership, you need to be able to qualify that they're really gonna like get on board with the program and see it through, completion, and see it through, the product happening or the program happening or the record being made. And qualifying is really, really difficult, particularly with, clients in more different or experimental projects, or new relationships or new programs, new clients versus incumbent or old clients. So it's always just kind of a little bit of a moving target, but
Reassessing it.
yeah.
You guys made me think of another fun new agey concept that we talk
Yes,
about a lot.
yes.
Oh, good.
Which is we talk all the time at work about promise makers and promise keepers.
Yeah.
And that this is kind of all about that, right? Is like because there's work you probably shouldn't take sometimes too, and people can make promises. Like we can all just make promises about anything, but promise keepers are the stakeholders that you really need to be concerned with, and what's behind those things. So whether it's a budgetary concern or a creative concern or a timeline, or like all those things factor into that question too. I know that's a little off topic, but we're kind of talking about the state of a project when you get into it too, and reading the landscape and stuff.
You like learn when it's a trap.
Yep.
Like a lot of times, like
trap.
the more like it's a trap. The more, and like not all the time, but like sometimes these like really attractive, incredible projects are like totally a trap.
Or they turn into them over
Or
time.
yeah, and then you're like, oh, quicksand.
Yeah.
I not overheard, but I was like with some folks at a conference that are like the kind of the biggest, in my opinion, motion graphics designers in the world. They were talking about this big feature film and who was going to do the computer vision. And these are the guys who, like, when I was a student, I was like watching videos of them at like 2 a.m, trying to like hope that I was going to ever make anything cool. And all of a sudden, I'm like at this table, and they're talking about how like, oh, that movie, that's the Poison Chalice. None of us want it. Like they were all talking about how they all bid on it, but nobody really wanted to do it because they knew that it, like, you're going to get into it and it was not going to be collaborative, and they were going to try to tell you how to design it and like all this stuff. And I'm like, man, this is the same kind of conversation that like I would have had when I was 19 about building a website for like my mom's friend, and you guys are like the hottest designers in the world. This is awesome. It's like, it's refreshing, like at every level, to just remember that that's just how art is. That's how creativity is in any medium that you choose. There's always the negotiation of ideas and who's leading and who's following and how to collaborate. It's never a perfect science. And when you find those really good collaborators, keep them, cherish them, buy them donuts. Like that's such an it's such
Especially
like an
donuts.
important thing because they're magical. I've had.
What kind of donuts would you buy?
I can't eat a donut, but I have bought extremely decadent donuts.
I'm just trying to qualify this
Qualify the
relationship right
donut
now,
situation.
yeah.
So there's a Stan's Donuts next to my office. Glazed and Confused is everywhere in Chicago. So
I don't even know what that is, but
I did like a lot of Glazed and Confused for my team for a while, which are like these really insane, like decadent donuts from outer space.
In
I think I'll go
California,
to San Francisco then.
Okay.
in San Francisco, they have to be gluten-free. So.
Yeah. For me, like, I need like gluten-free, dairy-free, like all of the things, like basically.
They're not donuts at that point.
It's juice.
Rice
It's juice.
cracker. I just want a rice cracker with peanut butter.
Situational donuts.
Yes. Hashtag. There you go.
Situational donuts, hashtag.
Hi, I'm Amanda from the Creative Writing Program, and I was just wondering if you had any advice or recommendations as to what to do when you find yourself in the situation of being a team leader, but your team members are not as excited about the project as you are, because you don't want to spend your time and energy hurting them the whole project, but you don't also want to say like, well, just give up on them and let them fail. So, like, have you had any experiences in that, or?
Yeah, and I think it's being the leader in that project. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump onto this, but it's exciting for me. It's like it's your job as the in that position to find ways to make it exciting for them, and that comes with knowing your team. And like sometimes it's impossible to make them completely excited about it, but you've as the leader have to find ways to make it work and get to the other finish line. And hopefully you picked that team, or that team was put there for a reason. But I mean, that's the short answer for me, is like find a way.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to make
Get it done.
Yeah.
It's tricky because sometimes you want the team to be inspired and to be fired up about it, but they're just not. And the thing is you can't force that to happen. And the more you try and make that happen, the less likely they're going to participate at a deeper level, which is like, the reverse of what you want. So it's funny. It's like if somebody's not fired up about it, there's a few things you could do. I mean, one thing is you could speak about why you're fired up about it. The thing is you have to be really genuine and not try and force anything in that moment, because it's like if you're trying to get a creative person that's just not into something like fired up. It's one thing when you're at school. I mean, granted, this is a real world style school, so it's similar, but it's another thing at a job where it's like, all right, I'm not that fired up about it, but I'm still a professional. I got to get it done. I got to get inspired. I got to make it look good. I got to do my thing. That's my job. But with the team, there's other ways to do it. So, I mean, unifying around the goal, the execution, getting it done, about doing the best work. And also, one thing you could do is try and get more buy-in from the other team members. So right now, if you're the leader, your instinct is like, let me lead harder to try and make them like this more. That may give you the exact opposite of effect that you want. Like, one thing you might do is talk to them about it, listen to them, ask them more questions, and what's actually going to be happening is you're going to be making them almost more curious about it. They may never love whatever you're working on, but at least it'll start to get them more engaged and feel a part of it. One thing especially is true with younger students and with professionals of all ages is, sometimes people are feeling a little self-conscious of what they think of the idea. Sometimes you need to kind of like open up the room and be inviting and draw a few things out of people. Next thing you know, an hour later, you're having a conversation and everyone's into it and fired up. So you as a leader, especially a creative leader, have to find a way to kind of stoke the fire and like sprinkle little things and create like curiosity and get people excited and just set the mood and the tone and then let it happen.
Yeah, there's alchemy there.
I have another goofy saying that sums that up.
Yes.
Of course.
You can't motivate others. You can only activate the motivation within them.
Ooh, I like that.
Ooh.
I have that on a bumper sticker. So many wrecks, people trying to read that.
But it's true that someone said that to me a long time ago, and I was like, man, that's a bunch of bull.
It's true.
But it's actually what I've found that if you're having that challenge, just stepping back and asking yourself like, what would excite them, right? If you know the project's exciting, and most in the world we're all trying to work in, most things are. I mean, there's something exciting about most of the stuff we get to do. Then what is it that's not, that their motivation hasn't been activated, right? Why? And then, I mean, some people just, sometimes you have to fire people too.
Yeah, but you can't do that in school. And I've been there with tough groups when I was a youngster, and I've been in tough teams as a leader without authority to fire, which is also really hard. Yeah. One of the things that you said, Nate, that was really good is you have to be really genuine. So like I can tell you the stuff that I do to motivate my team, because motivation as a creative director is one of like the most important things you have to do constantly, because people are exhausted and you need to have them juiced up, and like even if you have the same amount of time for them, if their juiced up time is like way better. I'm weird, like it's clear. So I've known that we were going to have really bad reviews, and I've literally like given a really bad review, gone into another room, put on a costume, came out as another person, and then gave a very positive review as someone else that didn't matter. Because that's what I do, like I've gone on thrift store shopping sprees. I've taken my team to museums countless amounts of time. It's understanding what that is, like if it's Stevie Wonder dance party, like that is like a Kim Alpert classic. Like if everybody is bummed out, like 5 minutes, Stevie Wonder dance party, everybody up, like you have to just get down and then start over. You got to figure out what works for you. If you cook really well, like bribing people with food is phenomenal. Like a lot of times people are unmotivated or crabby, like they're super hungry and or they just, food helps. Yeah. Situational donuts.
Answer everything.
I like this.
There's some questions in the front.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel Lewis. I take recording arts. My question is, when working with a new client who might have a higher standing than you on that project, what questions do you ask to make sure the collaboration is smooth and there are no bumps in the road?
Can I say one thing? This is more your world, but I just want to say one thing real quick, because I had an experience similar to this. When you're you want to do well because this client and this potential person is at a higher level than what you've worked with before. Is that what you're saying?
No, I want to do well because I want to do well.
But am I understanding that, like, can you reframe the question? Because I kind of read it that, like, if you're working with somebody that's like at a really high level, how do you deal with that, right? Like, what kind of questions do you ask?
What questions do I ask to make sure that I give the person I would give the person what they want, and also I would
Okay.
also.
Oh, that you're going to do the best that you're going to do. All right, I read it differently at first. Yeah. Situational
fly off
sneezes.
So yeah, I thought you were just making.
Well, I thought he was initially asking something else, but I mean, to me, the thing is really the questions that you ask have to get down to the heart of what matters to that person. And it doesn't matter if you're in a booth with somebody like with Kim and creative director sitting behind it, or you're recording with somebody, or you're in your first job interview. I mean, you're there to work with that person and capture the essence of it. So really speaking about the heart of what matters to them and getting very clear on that intention and asking questions that, like, get to the heart of their creative and what you're there to capture. That's part of it for me. But I'll let you take over.
Yeah.
I thought you were asking something else at first.
Yeah, and I think I had a little bit of the same confusion too. But I mean, ultimately, this person that you're working with is hiring you because they have some level of trust that you're going to help them accomplish whatever it is that they want to do. So I think it is about asking the right questions, and I guess this is where my confusion starts to set in, but it's more, it's about asking the right questions and having that conversation with them about what they want, even if they had, you said, a higher level of a standard, you said, than you. I mean, again, like, if they hired you, there's some level of trust that they're going to get that standard that they expect from you. So, and your job is to find a way to get there with you and your team.
And what I was going to say, just to tack on, because you heard it the same way I did then, is when you're new and you're in a position where you're working with somebody that maybe has a high expectation, you can you have to have the awareness to know that, like, asking too many questions or asking questions that start to become repetitive or start to show that you're new can be dangerous, especially with a person that's really high up. So sometimes it's like, you want to do a great job and you're eager, but if you ask too many questions, it also kind of shows your cards too much. So I think, like, again, the balance and understanding the situation and reading it and knowing when to engage, reading the room, reading the flow, knowing not to bombard them, that's pretty critical when you get a first kind of big break opportunity like that. Because, especially in a session with a musician and with anybody, somebody just barking in your ear asking questions. One, I'm starting to doubt, is this the guy I want to be working with? Because he doesn't seem like he really knows. He's asking me everything. And then two, it's kind of taking me out of a flow state and putting me in a thinking state of answering your questions. And I just want to be there to do what I'm there to do. So I think it's probably a very delicate balance.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think just to put a music-specific point on it, I think the best thing to do on any music-related project when you're starting out is, and this is probably true with visual stuff too, but like getting reference as quickly as possible. What people's standards don't mean, especially when you're talking about music, don't mean anything to me unless I'm actually listening to some music. Like, we can say stuff with language all day, with verbal language, but the second you start communicating over existing pieces of music, so say you're doing a mix for somebody, and you're not sure what the standard is or something, but get 3 or 4 tracks. The first thing I do when I walk in as a producer to a mix that I'm being asked to listen to is ask to hear what their ref is. What are they referencing? You can't not be referencing something. I don't care how good you are. I want to know what your reference is, whether it's, especially if it's a room I've never been in before or something. And so, that's a super specific answer, but you can get a lot more answers from things than you can from words.
But it's the same. Reference material, style tiles, mood boards, style sheets, whatever you want to call them. That's like the most critical thing to get sign off on before you start actually building a project, because you're creating something where you're both looking at it and it's the same thing, where we could I could be like, hey, Nate, I want you to build this thing, but I want it to be like a really dance style. And he could go off and be like, cool, we're gonna make like this electronic music thing. And in my mind, I was like, man, this merengue thing is gonna be like so good. Like we could be totally talking about different things, like super duper different.
Yeah, but you kind of like it though.
But I like it, yeah. And then like the BPM, it could be totally different.
Yeah.
And this is something definitely as I've gotten older and more established that I've had to embrace the formality. I definitely, would just go in and be like asking questions and then go out and then think I knew what I was talking about. But now I have a pretty like serious process around like, here's my intake questions, here's my intake form sometimes that I make other folks, like account folks, fill out. Because we have a reference point that's documented. So 2 weeks from now, when we're building stuff and we're burning hours and time and money, whoever is the client or the collaborator on it, they can't be like, oh, well, I thought you meant, electronic music. I'm like, well, right here, it's documented that this is a Latin vibe.
That still happens, though, by the way.
Constantly, yeah. I talk all the time about how I have no memory. I'm like a goldfish brain because it's all in my smartphone. I need to have that. It's really, really important, and it'll save you every time. The more you document at the beginning, the better you plan your projects. The better the process goes to create it, the better the handoff goes to deliver it, and the better the product is at the end. Like there's no amazing thing ever that didn't have great planning to lead up to it.
And go ahead. I was going to say sometimes you just don't get there, and sometimes it doesn't work out, and no matter how much of that back and forth goes, like the person might not be. And I guess I'm speaking more specifically with an artist that I manage and working with an indie label that like has one vision for what the project is, and part of it is knowing your team and knowing who needs to have ownership or like what you need to activate in them to motivate them to be like down with the project, because they would send us this video that like they sent us the references and we were like, okay, we hired somebody that delivered like something that was like within that reference of what we thought would deliver a video that would be of quality for the label. And when we were done with it, we turned it in. But the mistake that we made was we never involved the branding and marketing person at the label that was ultimately going to have to champion this art, this footage, out to the world. And when he got it, he's like, it's not good enough, and here are the reasons why. And so like it was that process. Like we didn't get fired because we're a team. We're working with this label to deliver music and product. And luckily that mistake was only like a couple $1,000s, but it could end up being $1 million. And I think it just comes down to knowing your team and what level of expectation they have and the references that they have and doing your best. And we ultimately, we're not putting the video out. So that's what my example of like sometimes you just don't get there, but you have to learn from those mistakes and then apply it as you go down the line, especially if you're going to work with that person again.
I think as you start to deal with talented people and sophisticated artists and people that are doing big things, it's important to realize that every question you ask is also kind of making a statement about you as an artist and you as a professional. So everything you're doing is kind of informing them or forming a picture of who you are to them. And so I would imagine that, great collaborators, when they're asking questions, it's making the other person feel a certain thing. It's making them feel like reassured. It's making them feel like they're getting to lean in, that they're getting to open up. I mean, that's what a great photographer does, a great director does. They take a talent that maybe is uncomfortable and they open them up and they're asking them questions, and really those questions are also communicating something back. So a real basic level of that is when I have a new intern that says, hey, how do I do this? Hey, what do I do next? Hey, do you like this? Hey, do I do that? They're communicating to me that maybe they're nervous, that they don't really know what's going on, that if their skill isn't that great yet, they're basically communicating to me another question: do I want to invest more time with this person? So when you're in an opportunity with somebody that's got high standards, the questions you ask communicate a lot. When I heard the way he would have said it, because I don't ever sit in music sessions like what you guys do, he said like, I'm walking into a room, I don't know, what's your ref? And I'm thinking to myself, that makes me feel like here's a guy that has his workflow, his system. He wants to know what I'm bringing to the table, and then he's eager to start talking about it and doing what he does. So just pay attention to what you ask and the way that you ask it, and think about what it's also saying about you as a growing professional.
That's great.
I think we have time for one more question. Gentleman up here.
Hi, I'm Lev from Recording Arts. I wanted to know in terms of collaboration, when it comes, like, how you guys deal with like creative curves with people. Like, I know as a musician, I've had experiences where I've been making some songs with my friends, and we end up running into problems whether our styles just don't blend, or we can't decide whether to do this or to do that. So, like, have you guys ever had experiences like that? And if so, how do you overcome that and end up getting the project to work, make it good, and not give up on it?
My answer to that is probably repeating some stuff we've already said, but it's a great question. And I think it's, I think in any situation, I want to know how important is it to me to be right, I guess is the right way to say it, right? Like, I can't think of a better way to say that. Maybe you guys can, but
No,
but like, it's not, and I'm not just talking about simple like compromises, like saying, hey, I'll do this for you, but I want to get my thing in there too. But just like straight up, like, my mind is just like this churning, bubbling thing. I mean, that's the way it feels inside my head, and there's always like 90 things going on. And so when I'm listening to playback of a tune that I've been working on with a composer or something, and between the time they start the 3-minute track and the time it ends, I might think of like 15 or 20 things. And it's really important for me to take the time and think of like which ones are really important, what matters. I mean, what are you making? Like in my case, in your case, if you're making music for music's sake, I think it's a little different. If I'm making music for a video game or a film or something like that, that's the thing that's important. So it's kind of figuring out what's really important. Who wrote the song? Where did it come from? Are you working on a song that is truly collaborative, like a bunch of you came up with it in a room? Or are you working on a song that was somebody's vision? Like, I work with a friend of mine a lot who writes, lyrics and chord changes and then does nothing else and gives me the tunes and is like, produce this thing. But in my mind, that's still his song. So as much as I want to be a part of that and make it our thing, at the end of the day, he's going to get what he wants. And we're just doing that stuff for fun, but he's not my client. So I think it really depends on what's important. But I think the better you are at, and this goes back to like not being defensive about your work, but it's also like letting things go is a really good gift to give yourself over time when you're working on creative stuff, as long as it's not going to damage the quality of the thing. I mean, you add value to something by letting people get their way, which is surprising, but it's true. Mm-hmm. And you build trust in that relationship. So if these are people you want to continue to work with, then, listening and seeing. And then the other cool thing about this is like we're all working in digital mediums, so do it the way they're saying. Like, if you're working in Pro Tools or whatever, like fork the path and make 2 sessions and show them your thing and do their thing, and then just sit back and be like, which one sounds better? And learn from it all while you're doing that. I mean, I gotta say, man, you're dropping science up here, and I love it. And if you had a book, I would read it.
Yes.
The asking yourself how much do I need to be right here? I like not just in school, not just collaborating, but in life. If you learn that lesson, my God, he is dropping some science. And what I love about Hall of Fame is like I learned from you guys, I learned from these guys, but I mean, just awesome stuff. Yeah.
I don't always do all this stuff, by the way. I just like.
You're really good. No, this is really good.
Call your book Situational Donuts.
Yeah,
I'll buy it.
Situational Donuts, best coffee, but it needs to be small.
Yeah, it has to be small and look good on a coffee table. Exactly.
It's a pop-up book.
Yes,
Pop-up book would be the best. Scratch and sniff. But I mean, so. And I don't want to interrupt if you had your thought.
I do, but I forgot. So I'm gonna get it back.
I already made you forget it.
Yeah, I'm working it.
Okay. So a lot of it's also knowing the project that you're working on and how much time it's going to complete, and also like each artist for me, and I'm going to speak from the label side, is different and their process is different. Some of them like I know are going to come up with, and it comes from working with them for a while. I know that they're going to have a sudden, they're going to be like, man, I love this song. And then 6 months later, they're like, I hate this song and it can't be on my album. And that was the song that for the label or anything else, that was the song that made that thing done. And then all the other things that came after it. So then it's talking with the artists and being like, okay, well, remember the bigger picture of like, what it was that you wanted to accomplish. I want to tour as an artist, blah, blah, blah. Well, in order to tour, we need the album or we need the songs done. And if we need the songs done, that means, again, like you were saying, if the game is coming out on this date, then the music needs to be done at some point before that date happens. So, communicating deadlines, and also, my job as an A&R person is to facilitate the artist's process as well as deliver a product that the label can use and bring to the public. So, and the artist's job is to be creative and create that thing that we're gonna use. And therefore, they're on deadlines just like me and just like the marketing person at the label or anybody else that is there. But it's creating, realistic deadlines based upon, knowing their creative process and having that discussion ahead of time. So, like I know for a fact, one of the artists that I work with, it was like, they loved the song 2 months ago, and then this month, like, in the label's like, it's gonna be a single, it's gonna be massive, like in the UK and the US, and then it's like, the artist doesn't like the song anymore. He thinks it's the worst and doesn't want it on there. So it's like, what's more important, like how you feel about the song, like in that moment, even though at one time you thought it was great as a creative person, I think it's just in you to question what it is. And then, it's my job to be like, I think you might be overthinking it. Like, just sit and think about what's more important, getting rid of the song and pushing the deadline back and upsetting a lot of the people on your team who have been working for months on making this thing happen for you? Or is it making all of the things happen that you wanted to do in the first place and doing them on time so that you can move on and continue to create and continue to do your job?
Yeah, I thought of it, just so you know. I liked your stuff. I think, creativity it's a sport, collaborating and making art, and it's a muscle that you have to work. And it's not, some people are born with some great talent, some dudes are awesome baseball players right out the gate, but all of us have to go and train and get stronger. And I love that you said curves, because immediately I thought about skiing, right? And like when you know how to ski, you're like doing really well and you're not hitting a tree and no one's getting hurt. But when you don't and you first go out, like you're probably gonna fall on your butt. And that's kind of like making art and collaborating and making creative products, whatever it is. These projects, you're gonna find weird conversations where there's a person who's a much bigger tree than you expected, and like you can't get all the way around, and you totally bonk yourself on the face. And then eventually you get to a point where you feel very agile and able to navigate those things. I started collaborating with this woman a couple weeks ago, and we met a couple of months ago playing a show, and I just knew immediately, and I got like too busy to communicate with her before we were going to do an improvised set together. And I just said to her, I was like, you know what, I just feel like we speak the same language and I'm not worried about it. And it was 50-50 chance I was right, but I felt it, and then it went really well. And the whole time that we were working on stuff together, it was like this beautiful slow motion tennis where I'd be like, what about this? And she'd be like, I like it like this. And I'd be like, try it this way. Like it just worked.
It's called badminton.
It's badminton. No, that's what she said. She called it badminton. It was she's so great. She was like, this is like badminton. And it really was. And we're both two people who've been in our craft for a really long time. She's a musician and I'm a visual artist. And our ability to speak about both of our disciplines and work together it just clicked. And it's great when it does, but we both had to get our muscles to be able to do that. So, the most important thing, no matter what happens to you when you leave here, keep making stuff, whatever it is. We're not all able to just start professionally doing that. I didn't right away out of school. Well, I did and I didn't. It was a mess. Like I worked all kinds. I did construction at one point in the first year after I graduated. Like, why? I was a personal shopper. I did a lot. I was a bartender, a lot of stuff in that first year, as well as making stuff, because the most important thing was that I was always making stuff in my craft. So just don't stop, and you'll continue to grow those muscles and be like super strong.
yeah, the quantity of work you do is huge.
Yeah.
So finish things. So if you're stuck collaborating with people, just finish that thing and move on to something else.
Let's end on that beautiful last note. Thank you so much for attending our session today, everyone. And we especially want to thank our guests, Chris, Kim, Jonathan, and Nate.